Since Hansi Flick arrived, Barcelona had become one of the best teams in the world. In the last 2 seasons they already won 4 trophies and currently Blaugrana is sitting on the top of La Liga. They are qualified for the last 16 in the Champions League and they are in the Copa del Rey quarter-finals. Despite the loss against Real Sociedad in La Liga last week, it seems that the atmosphere is great at Barcelona. In the previous video I analyzed Flick's tactics in possession and today I will talk about Barcelona's off-the-ball tactics. We need to go back to the start of 2024-25 season when German manager arrived. He completely changed Barcelona's pressing shape. Before last season, teams usually pressed in a 4-4-2 formation without applying a big amount of pressure on the backline, but rather forcing the opponent to play into wide areas or waiting for specific pressing triggers. However, Flick changed Barcelona's shape and they started to press the opponent with some kind of 4-2-4 formation, but it was more like 4-2-2-2. The thing is that Lewandowski is aging and he cannot press with the same intensity as some younger players. So, Flick dropped Lewandowski and his new role was to mark the opponent's defensive midfielder alongside Barcelona's number 10. That would mean that wingers are now the most offensive players. Their role was to press the center backs, but not just it. If the ball went back to goalkeeper, they needed to continue their press and apply pressure on goalkeeper while maintaining center backs in a cover shadow. However, the center back was able to pass the fullback. Now Barcelona's fullback needed to press him. That would mean that Barcelona is playing man-oriented press. But high position of Barcelona's fullback meant that there is a big gap in the backline. When there was a goal kick, they marked opposition wingers with the center backs, while defensive midfielders dropped to mark forwards. However, from the open play, this approach will be a bad idea since Barcelona needs pivots for counter-pressing and if Barcelona want the ball, they will be far from the goal. So, when the opponent's fullback had the ball in the open play, Barcelona's fullback would apply pressure on him while whole defense shifted across. This is where Flick's side goes from a man-oriented pressing to option-oriented pressing. When fullback receives, then Barcelona's own fullback applies direct pressure while other players mark or block the other options. This often puts a defender in a situation where he has no options, which often results in turnover. If pressing was just a little bit late, there could be a space for the 1-2. And if the fullback is technical enough, there will be a potential long ball and possible overload. As the season progressed, it was harder and harder for Balde and Koundé to patrol down the whole flank, and it was one of the reasons for their elimination from the Champions League by Inter. Hansi Flick adapted their pressing shape. From the opponent's goal kick, they often lined up in some kind of 3-2-3-2 formation. Now, Koundé would tuck in to create a back three, while Balde would push forward. Defensive midfielders maintained their positions. Balde's high positioning allowed left winger to join center forward and create first line of pressing. Second line of pressing were formed by left back attacking midfielder and right winger. This shape allowed Koundé to be more defensive and he didn't have to patrol down the whole right flank and press the fullback. Assignments were clear. Left winger and center forward were pressing center backs while left back and right winger were ready to press full back. If the ball went to the right center back, then it was Balde's assignment to press right back, while Yamal needed to mark defensive midfielder with Olmo or Fermin, marking their central midfielder. Same thing would happen when the ball was played to left center back. Front line would press them, right winger would be ready to press the full back, while attacking midfielder marked closer defensive midfielder and left back tucked in to mark remaining pivot. This pattern allowed Barcelona to maintain aggressive man-oriented pressing while being overloaded in that horizontal line. Another advantage of 3-2-3-2 formation are staggered lines. If you have staggered lines, it will be harder for opponent to pass the ball between the lines. However, this pressing shape reveals some weaknesses. One is of course smaller coverage of wide spaces, which Real Madrid exploited very well in the first Clásico of the season. Whenever Valverde received the ball from the center back, Camavinga knew that Balde will press him, so he positioned himself wider to create 2v1 overload. If Barcelona wanted to counter that 2v1 overload, one of midfielders needed to track Camavinga. That would mean that Barcelona is overloaded in the midfield. Even if center back followed the attacking midfielder, it will create a situation where center back and right back are facing opponent's attackers 50 meters from their goal. It would not be that dangerous if the opponent isn't that fast, but if you play against pacey opponents, it will be really risky. So, this formation has certain advantages and disadvantages, but it was obvious that Flick's side cannot play serious opponents with this pressing shape. So, he changed it again. German manager shifted back to 4-2-4 formation, but the execution is now different. Since Lewandowski is playing much less, Barcelona's striker has now more traditional role. Attacking midfielder will join Ferran Torres as central attacker without the ball. In Hansi Flick's former 4-2-4 shape, wingers were most offensive players. However, they are no longer applying pressure on the center backs. Their new assignments are fullbacks. When the opponent's center back has the ball, closer attacker will pass him, but he needs to leave pivot in a core shadow. When he is sure that he did it, then press will begin. There is one small detail I need to mention. When one central forward is applying pressure on a center back, other central forward pushes a little bit higher than wingers. His positioning signals defender that he is ready to press other center back if the ball goes to him, so there are just two options for the player who has the ball. First one is to go long and the other one is pass to the left back. And then right winger will be ready to press him. If everything is applied well, opponent will be left with no options. This shape makes it harder for the opponent to make wide overloads comparing to 3-2-3-2 formation. And the advantage over previous 4-2-4 formation is that right winger is now pressing left back and it's hard to overload that side of the pitch, since right back can stay deeper and mark left winger. Even if pivot decides to overload that side, Barcelona's pivot can follow him. So, does it mean that this shape is ideal? Of course not. In the match against Chelsea, we saw that Flick's side can struggle against positional-oriented 3-2-5 formation. Chelsea's shape in that match meant that they have 5v4 advantage over Barcelona's defense. They mostly tended to overload Koundé, so Flick dropped one of their center midfielders in the back line. But that would mean that other midfielder is now 2v1 down in the midfield. But Flick knew this, so he dropped attacking midfielder down. Chelsea still wanted to have advantage, so they often had one player positioning himself in the midfield to regain numerical advantage. It seemed that Chelsea's overload in the center meant that Barcelona can go man-on-man against Chelsea's defense. However, Chelsea's goalkeeper was more than ready to play as second centre-back, which led to Yamal being overloaded. But to be honest, this is the only match where I saw that Flick's new 4-4 pressing shape is broken. Chelsea is a rare team that consistently tried to play from the backline and to break Barcelona's press. It's much more often that teams are scared to try to break Barcelona's aggressive man-on-man marking. It's more likely that teams will either go long or lose the ball in their own third of the pitch. In the last Clásico, we saw a little bit different variation of that pressing shape. We saw that Balde is marking opposition's fullback once again. His high positioning meant that now Rafinha can press the centre-back, while the attacking midfielder stayed a little bit deeper to be sure that Madrid doesn't have advantage in the midfield. Results were devastating for Real Madrid. They finished the first half with less than 25% of ball possession. And there is one more detail I have to mention. Just a few years ago it was considered too risky to have 3 players in the backline when you don't have the ball. Teams would usually have 2 centre-backs against opposition striker. However, in the past few seasons, teams are totally fine with having just 3 players in the backline. And that is exactly what we saw in the last Clásico. Barcelona didn't have a problem with pressing in 3-3-4 formation, which resulted in Barcelona's possession dominance. And this is modern football, man-on-man pressing on whole pitch. We really quickly went from complete zonal marking to hybrid marking and then to complete man-on-man marking. And of course, I didn't mention everything about Barcelona's press. If you have anything to add, drop it down below. You can check my analysis of Barcelona in possession.